On Tuesday evening, I was sitting in my office in Seattle when my secretary Emily informed me via intercom, "Sir, Linda Thompson has arrived." "Who's Linda Thompson?" I asked instinctively. "Sir, the one who has come to see you two." "Oh, 3 times before," Emily explained. "Oh, all right," I said. "Send her in." Earlier that day, after dealing with court matters, I had returned to my office, and Emily had told me that a woman named Linda Thompson from Tacoma had come to meet me. She had waited for a while and then left, saying she would return. And now she was back. A short while later, Linda Thompson entered my office. She wasn't alone. A shy-looking girl, around 30 years old, accompanied her. Emily either forgot to mention the girl or perhaps Linda Thompson had come alone the first time. I invited them to sit, and after formal greetings, looked at Linda Thompson and asked, "How can I assist you?" Linda Thompson appeared to be over 50 years old, an ordinary housewife. The girl with her bore a striking resemblance to her, and I cautiously assumed she might be her daughter. "Sir, Mr. Carter sent us to you," she said in a troubled tone. Then, confirming my assumption, she added, "This is my daughter Sarah." Looking at Sarah, I asked Linda Thompson, "Which Mr. Carter are you referring to?" "Mr. James Carter," she replied. "The one who works at the newspaper. He assured us you would resolve our issue." It clicked immediately. James Carter was a senior journalist who also lived in Tacoma. I had known him for a long time. I picked up a pen and paper and asked with deep seriousness, "What is your problem?" "It's about Michael," she said hesitantly. "Who's Michael?" I asked, looking at her questioningly. "Michael Davis." "Is my son, sir," she answered. "What happened to Michael?" I inquired. "The police have arrested Michael," she said in a choked voice. "On what charge?" I couldn't help but ask. "The police claim Michael murdered Jessica," she said, breaking into tears. "Sir, I know my Michael could never do such a thing. I feel there's a deep conspiracy behind his arrest." I sank into thought and then asked, "Who was Jessica, and what was her connection to your son, Michael?" "Jessica lived in Tacoma, 2 houses away from ours," Linda Thompson began, composing herself. As for her connection with Michael, she took a deep breath and continued, "Michael liked Jessica. So it was a love affair?" I asked. "Something like that, sir," Linda Thompson nodded. "If your son loved Jessica, how could he kill her?" I asked, looking at her with a puzzled expression. "Sir, I've already told you Michael could never do such a thing," she said helplessly. "Either the police made a mistake or someone is trying to frame him. I'm absolutely certain my son is innocent. Police errors and misconceptions are no secret," I said calmly, "but the idea of someone framing him suggests a hidden enemy. Who do you think could be Michael's enemy?" "No one, sir," she said, shaking her head. "He's never had a fight with anyone. He's a quiet boy, sir. He goes to work in the morning and comes back in the evening." Upon further inquiry, Linda Thompson told me that Michael worked at a jeweler's shop in downtown Seattle, where he was a skilled craftsman making rings and other jewelry. His work hours were from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. He was the sole breadwinner of the family, supplemented by a small pension from his late father, Robert Wilson, who had retired from a government department and passed away from a heart attack shortly after. The family consisted of only 3 members, Michael, his sister Sarah, and their mother, Linda Thompson. Robert Wilson's greatest achievement during his service was building a small house, which was a significant asset. Looking at Linda Thompson, I asked, "Did Jessica's family know about this love affair?" "Yes, it wasn't a secret," she said, nodding. "What was Jessica's family's opinion of Michael?" I asked, referring to their romantic relationship. "They didn't." "Like Michael," she replied. "Was Jessica serious about Michael?" I asked. "Absolutely," she said affirmatively. "And that's exactly what her family didn't like." She paused abruptly, so I prompted, "And because of that, they arranged Jessica's marriage elsewhere," she said in a measured tone. "A month from now, Jessica was to marry Ethan." She paused for a moment, then added with a heavy sigh, "Ethan is Jessica's cousin. They live in Renton. Jessica didn't like Ethan at all. She refused the match outright, but her family forced her into the engagement and set the wedding date. So Jessica was to marry her cousin Ethan, But she loved your son, Michael, I said gravely. And a month before the wedding, Jessica was murdered, and the blame has been placed on your son. When and where was Jessica killed? There's an under-construction building 1 house away from ours, Linda Thompson replied. Jessica's body was found there. She was killed sometime last night. Her house is 2 houses away from yours, I said, looking at her questioningly. That means the crime scene. The under-construction building is also 2 houses away from Jessica's home. If her body was found there, why was your son arrested for her murder? It's all based on Rachel's statement, sir, Sarah spoke up for the first time. When the police arrived at the scene after Jessica's body was found, they questioned her family and others. Based on Rachel's statement, they arrested my brother from his shop this afternoon. We learned about his arrest in the afternoon and did everything we could. Then Mr. Carter told us about you and we came here. After Sarah finished speaking in one breath, I asked, "Who is Rachel?" "Rachel lives in our neighborhood, sir. Sarah Rogan System," Sarah replied calmly. "Her house is between ours and the under-construction building. She was Jessica's close friend. Jessica often visited her." I said thoughtfully. Rachel told the police that Jessica and Michael used to meet secretly at night in that under-construction building. Linda Thompson clarified. Based on her statement, the police came to our house, asked about Jessica's whereabouts, and when we expressed ignorance, they went straight to Michael's shop and arrested him for her murder. The shop staff informed us about his arrest in the afternoon, and in our distress we ended up here. "What else do you know about this incident?" I asked, twirling my pen between my fingers. "We've told you everything we know, Linda," Thompson said earnestly. "All I know is that Michael cannot be a murderer. He loved Jessica. How could he take her life? A mother's emotions for her son hold great significance, but courts prioritize solid evidence and logical arguments over feelings." Listening carefully to Linda Thompson, I asked, what was Michael's reaction to Jessica's engagement and the fixing of her wedding date? "He was hurt," Linda Thompson replied. "He became very sad and withdrawn." "And how was Jessica feeling?" I asked. "Obviously, sir, she didn't want this marriage either," Linda Thompson said simply. "She loved Michael and wanted to marry him, but the poor girl was helpless against her family's wishes." "Didn't Michael try to encourage Jessica to take some bold step?" I asked, looking at both of them meaningfully. "Not at all." "Sir?" Linda Thompson said, looking confused. Sarah, understanding my hint, quickly said, "My brother is a very peace-loving person. He doesn't have the courage for revolutionary actions. He tried to convince Jessica to accept her fate, saying whatever is meant to happen will happen. There was no protest or fuss. If Michael thinks like that, he truly is an extremely peace-loving person," I said. "In common terms, such people are often called naive or cowardly." I paused briefly, took a deep breath and added, "Usually in such situations, a young man takes a stand and tries every possible way, fair or unfair, to win his love. But Michael told Jessica to quietly marry where her family wanted, didn't he?" I looked at Sarah questioningly, and she nodded in affirmation. Turning to Linda Thompson, I asked, "What time did Michael come home last night?" "Around 8 o'clock, she replied. "His shop closes at 7, and he's usually home by 7:30 or 8 at the latest." "So, Michael came home at 8 last night," I said, scribbling on my notepad in a self-reflective tone. Then, looking at Linda Thompson, I asked, "Did he go out again after that?" "Yes, he did," she nodded. "Where did he go?" I asked. "To chat with his friends," she said. "It's his routine. After coming home from the shop, he freshens up, we eat dinner together, and then he goes out to hang out with his neighborhood friends." "And what time does he usually return?" I asked. "He's back by 10 or 10:30, she said. "Was he back by 10 or 10:30 last night as well?" I asked. "I was very tired," Linda Thompson replied. "I fell asleep right after dinner." She looked at Sarah and added, "You'd know what time he came back last night." "Brother came back around midnight," Sarah said firmly. "I was awake and opened the door for him. It was about 12:30. "Did you ask him where he was so late?" I asked, looking into Sarah's eyes. "His routine was to be back by 10 or 10:30. "No," Sarah shook her head. "I didn't ask him anything about it." I turned to Linda Thompson and asked, "Can you arrange for Michael's friends from last night to testify as witnesses?" "Yes, I can do that," she replied. "All right," I said, satisfied. "Which police station is Michael being held at?" She told me the name of the station. "Have you tried to meet Michael at the station?" I asked. "We went, but the police didn't let us see him," she said. "What did they say?" I inquired. "They said Michael will be presented in court tomorrow morning, and anyone who wants to meet him can do so there," Linda Thompson replied. I spoke candidly. "Look, madam, I must clarify that getting bail for a murder accused is extremely difficult, but don't worry, I'll do my best. Whatever happens next is in God's hands." "Thank you so much, sir," she said gratefully. After that, I collected my fee from Linda Thompson and said calmly, "I'll visit the station tonight to meet Michael. I might learn something new from him. We'll meet again tomorrow morning in court." She thanked me again, said her goodbyes, and left my office with her daughter. Some readers object that I turn my office into a courtroom. I start cross-examining every client who comes to me, asking dozens of questions. Let me clarify that everyone has their own style of working, and mine is quite different from other lawyers, which is why it seems strange to some. By God's grace, I've never lacked clients since my apprenticeship days, so I don't take on just any case. I don't accept a case until I'm personally satisfied with the client. That's why I've never let an innocent person be convicted, nor has any guilty person been acquitted, due to my advocacy. I can't thank God enough for this blessing. After finishing my office tasks, I went to the police station in Tacoma to meet Michael. I parked my car along the station's boundary wall and calmly walked to the in-charge's room. The in-charge wasn't there. An officer was sitting in the room. I asked him, "Where's the in-charge?" Before answering, the officer scrutinized me from head to toe and asked curtly, "Who are you and what do you want with the in-charge?" "My name is Andrew," I said, deliberately giving an incomplete introduction. "I'll tell the in-charge what I want." "The in-charge is on rounds right now," he said casually. "If you want to meet him, come back tonight." Feeling a bit mischievous, I said gravely, "So you think it's daytime right now?" He glared at me irritably and said, "I meant come back when the in-charge is here." "That'll be too late," I said regretfully. "What do you mean, too late for what?" he asked, sitting up straight. "Too late to meet Michael," I said, maintaining my serious tone. "Michael?" he said, startled, looking at me. "Who's Michael?" "The young man you arrested this afternoon from a jeweler's shop in downtown Seattle on murder charges," I said sternly. "You can't meet that suspect," he said bluntly. "I'm Michael's lawyer, Andrew Bennett, attorney at law," I said, emphasizing each word. "You cannot stop me from meeting my client." Upon hearing I was a lawyer, he became cautious and said aggressively, "Whoever you are, come back at night when the in-charge is here. You don't have permission." I reached for the telephone on the desk and said, "Let's resolve the permission issue right now." He panicked. "You're going to call the in-charge?" "No," I said, picking up the receiver. "I'm calling your in-charge's in charge. The chief of police will handle this." "Oh, sir, what are you doing?" he said, snatching the receiver from my hand. "If you want to meet the suspect, go ahead, God help us." I let out a satisfied sigh and said, "The chief's authority is remarkable. My issue was resolved before I even made the call." The officer gave me a piercing look and called out toward the door, "Officer Daniels." An officer appeared. In the room instantly, presumably Officer Daniels. The officer instructed him, "Take Andrew to the suspect arrested today for murder." Officer Daniels nodded, and I followed him. Moments later, I stood before Michael. He was sitting on the bare floor of the cell behind iron bars. Michael appeared to be around 27, a healthy and handsome young man, though he was in a distressed state, lost in thought about his predicament. Seeing me, he looked up and then glanced questioningly at Officer Daniels. The officer said, "Someone's here to meet you, talk to him." Obviously, Michael didn't know me, we had never met before. He stood up, hesitated briefly, and approached the bars. I turned to the officer, reached into my pocket and said, "Officer Daniels, I hear inflation has gotten bad these days." "Yes, sir, you're absolutely right," he said, nodding eagerly. "Gas is up to $4 a gallon, and groceries are through the roof. Don't even ask about other things." I took out my wallet, pulled out a crisp $50 bill, and handed it to him, saying, "Officer Daniels, this is your reward. I want 10 minutes alone with the suspect. Go take a walk and grab a coffee." He happily took the bill and left. Satisfied, I turned to Michael and introduced myself. "My name is Andrew Bennett, attorney at law. Your mother has appointed me as your lawyer. I'll get you out of this trouble." He looked at me gratefully and asked, "But sir, but—" "It's only if you answer every question I ask truthfully and directly," I said, emphasizing each word. "Absolutely," he said, nodding quickly. I took some papers from my briefcase, handed them to him, pointed out specific sections, and asked him to sign. These included the power of attorney and bail application. After he signed as instructed, I put the papers back in my briefcase, looked at him seriously and asked, "Michael, tell me the real story." "The real story," he said, swallowing hard, "is that I'm innocent, sir. I didn't kill Jessica. I know that," I said, nodding affirmatively. "If you had killed Jessica, I wouldn't have taken your case, but I want to know why the police arrested you for her murder if you're not the killer." "The police have lost their minds, sir," he said, shaking his head in frustration, "and Rachel messed with their heads. Is this the same Rachel who was Jessica's close friend and knew about your love affair?" I asked, looking into his eyes. "The one who told the police you and Jessica used to meet secretly in that under-construction building?" "Yes. She's the one who started this fire," he said bitterly. "Is it true that you met Jessica in that under-construction building where her body was found?" I asked, staring into his eyes. He hesitated, then said, "Yes, that's true." "So you and Jessica had a serious relationship?" I asked. "Yes, we liked each other," he nodded. "I heard Jessica's family was strongly against your relationship," I continued. "They arranged her marriage to her cousin Ethan, and the wedding was set for a month later." "Yes, that's the truth," he confirmed. "And I also know Jessica strongly disliked Ethan," I said. "You're absolutely right," he agreed. Testing his emotions, I took a shot in the dark and said calmly, "The police claim you were strongly opposed to Jessica's engagement to Ethan. You kept provoking her to run away with you." "That's complete nonsense and a lie," he said angrily. "I always tried to reason with her. Running away was her idea, but I opposed it." He paused briefly, looked into my eyes and said firmly, "I'm a brother to a young sister. How could I even think of eloping with someone's daughter?" "That's the police's claim, not mine," I clarified, then asked, "On the night of the incident after dinner you went out to chat with your friends. I want the names of those friends." "Their names are Ryan, Tyler, and Connor," he replied. "Your sister Sarah told me you returned home around 12:30 that night," I said. "What were you discussing with your friends for so long?" "The thing is, sir," he said, letting out a heavy sigh, "I only chatted with Ryan, Tyler, and Connor for a short while. Then I went with Connor." "Where did you go with Connor?" I asked. "To watch a movie," he replied. "Oh," I said, surprised, looking at him. "Which movie did you two see?" He named a popular action film. "Will Connor testify that you went to the last show with him that night?" I asked. "Why?" "Not, he'll definitely testify," he said confidently. "And what about Ryan and Tyler?" I asked, looking at him inquiringly. "Will they testify that you left with Connor to watch the movie and were chatting with them before that?" He nodded affirmatively. I asked a few more questions, and then Officer Daniels returned, so I had to wrap up. I reassured Michael with kind words and left. The next day, the police presented Michael in court seeking his remand. I argued strongly for my client's bail, but as expected, I wasn't successful. After hearing both sides, the court rejected the bail application and granted 7 days of police custody. When I visited Michael at the station the previous night, I knew his bail might be denied, so I had given him several tips to protect himself from police hospitality. I was hopeful he'd manage to stay safe during the remand period. Over the next week, I reflected on various aspects of the case and sought help from my old friend and Linda Thompson's well-wisher, James Carter, the journalist. Carter was a resourceful man. If given a task, he'd dig up information from anywhere. During this time, Linda Thompson visited my office twice, once alone and once with Sarah. She was quite anxious, as it was her first encounter with police and court matters. I explained the case's various angles in detail, which gave her some comfort. After the remand period, the police submitted the charge sheet to the court, including statements from other witnesses and the accused. The statement recorded during police custody is called the accused's confessional statement. Thanks to the instructions I gave my client to stay safe, he recorded a statement as per the police's wishes. As you know, statements given in police custody hold no weight in court. Courts follow a specific procedure, relying on factual evidence, witness statements, solid facts, undeniable proof, and strong arguments from lawyers. Court proceedings are initially quite dull and routine, so to spare you the boredom, I'll skip ahead a few steps to the formal trial, which began about 2 months later. On that day, everyone related to the case was present in the courtroom. The judge took his seat and the proceedings began on his order. The clerk read the charge sheet, and the accused denied the charges. Then the prosecution began presenting its witnesses. The prosecution submitted a list of over half a dozen witnesses, but I'll only mention those whose statements or testimonies were significant. First, I consider it necessary to briefly mention the post-mortem report, the prosecution's stance, and the accused's statement. According to the post-mortem report, Jessica's death occurred between 10 p.m. and midnight on the night of the incident. She was strangled to death. The medical examiner's report clearly stated that she was subjected to a criminal assault before her death. The disarray of her clothing also indicated she was brutally handled before being killed. There were also signs of physical assault on parts of her body. The report included additional revelations, but ethical considerations prevent me from detailing them publicly. The prosecution's stance, as presented in the charge sheet, was that Jessica loved Michael, but he wasn't serious about her. She wanted to marry him and live a respectable life, but he never showed genuine interest. When her family decided to marry her to her cousin Ethan and set the wedding date, Michael realized she would soon slip out of his hands. The two often met at the under-construction building, the crime scene. With only a month left until her wedding, Michael planned a meeting with Jessica that night. When she arrived as planned, he initially spoke lovingly to her, but then his darker instincts took over. Using his strength, he overpowered her and fulfilled his illicit desires. This was the first part of his plan. In the second part, out of fear of being caught, he strangled her to death. Michael couldn't bear the thought of Jessica marrying someone else, so after achieving his sinister objectives, he eliminated her. In his court statement, my client, Michael Davis, said he loved Jessica sincerely. He admitted to meeting her secretly at the under-construction building, but denied ever having malicious intentions. His love was pure, and he couldn't imagine harming her. He confirmed that Jessica's close friend Rachel was aware of their relationship. He also revealed that before her engagement he wrote a letter to Jessica's parents, stating his love for her and his desire to marry her. Her parents didn't respond, and soon after, he learned they had engaged her to Ethan. This hurt him deeply, but as a naturally peace-loving person, he accepted the situation rather than reacting aggressively. Jessica, however, wasn't ready to give up. She suggested they elope, but Michael refused. On the night of the incident, they had a brief meeting at the building where he tried to reason with her again before leaving her there to go watch a movie with his friend. At the prosecution's request, Michael was handed over for cross-examination. As soon as he finished his statement, the prosecution lawyer approached the witness box and asked, looking into his eyes, "Is it true you secretly met Jessica at the under-construction building?" "Yes, that's true," Michael replied calmly. "I clarified this in my statement." "Is it also true that you were deeply hurt when you heard about Jessica's engagement to her cousin?" the lawyer asked. "Naturally," Michael replied. "I loved Jessica sincerely and wanted to marry her. Hearing she was marrying someone else was bound to hurt me." Sincere love. The prosecution lawyer said mockingly, then asked, "What happened at the under-construction building that night was the result of your sincere love, wasn't it?" Michael replied boldly, "Sir, I've told you the truth. Draw whatever conclusions you want." "You stated to the court that you wrote a letter to Jessica's parents," the lawyer continued. "You claim it was to convince them of your love, while the prosecution says it was threatening. What's the story?" "The story is," Michael said simply, "what I said is true. The prosecution's claim is entirely false. If I sent a threatening letter, let them produce it in court as evidence. That will separate the truth from lies." "Very good," I said, looking at him approvingly, then turned to the prosecution. The accused has given an excellent suggestion to separate truth from lies. Addressing the judge, I added, Your Honor, the prosecution's witness list includes Jessica's parents. I request that when they appear to testify, they bring the mentioned letter. The judge listened attentively, nodded, and instructed the prosecution regarding the letter. I turned back to Michael. Michael, you said you and Jessica met at the under-construction building through a girl named Rachel, I said seriously. Can you clarify what you mean by through? Through, he repeated, then explained, Rachel lives in our neighborhood, and Jessica often visited her. She was Jessica's close friend and knew about our relationship. As for the meetings, Jessica and I arranged them ourselves, but Rachel provided moral support. Jessica would use the excuse of visiting Rachel to leave her house and her family. Felt she was safe at her friend's place, that's all. All right, I said, looking into his eyes. Did these meetings usually happen at night, or? I left the question open-ended. Mostly at night, but sometimes during the day, he replied quickly. What happened at the under-construction building on the night of the incident? I asked. We met around 9 o'clock, Michael said. We talked for about 10 to 15 minutes, then I left her there and went to my friends. Talked, I said, emphasizing each word. You had a discussion about something? Jessica's wedding was a month away, he said calmly. She was very upset about it. She didn't want to marry her cousin Ethan at all. She came to me with a drastic idea. What idea? I asked, startled. The idea of running away, he said in a low voice. She thought we should elope. And? I asked. I strongly opposed it, he said firmly. I clearly told her that running away wasn't an option, and that she should go home and accept her fate. Did she agree with you? I asked. Did she go back home after you reasoned with her? I can't say for sure, he replied. Why not? I asked. Because I left her there and walked out of the building, he said. I don't know if she left right after me or stayed longer. Her words had confused me. Where did you go after leaving her? I asked. To the next street, to my friends, he replied. I talked with them for 10 to 15 minutes, but my mind was still troubled. Then I went with my friend to watch a movie. Which friend? I asked. My friend Connor, he said. Can Connor testify in court that you went to the last show with him that night? I asked. I'm sure he won't refuse, he said, confidently. I have nothing further, Your Honor, I said, addressing the judge. The post-mortem report states Jessica's death occurred between 10 and 12 that night, the same time my client, Michael Davis, was at the cinema watching a movie with his friend. If the court permits, the defense will present Michael's friend Connor to testify. The judge nodded and looked at the prosecution, signaling them to present their next witness. Before they could comply, I spoke up. Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'd like to ask a few questions of the case's investigating officer. The judge granted permission immediately. The investigating officer, a detective, was required to be present at every hearing as a prosecution witness. He stepped into the witness box and I approached, looking into his eyes to begin my questioning. Detective, may I have your name? I asked, addressing the investigating officer. Robert Hayes, he replied. Detective Hayes, I said, looking at him intently. You must have studied the post-mortem report with great care, haven't you? Of course, he responded affirmatively. Is that even a question? According to the post-mortem report, the victim Jessica died between 10 p.m. and midnight on the night of the incident. Am I correct? Yes, sir, you're absolutely right, he confirmed. The report also reveals that Jessica was assaulted before being killed, I said with deep seriousness, and the condition of the clothing found on her body at the crime scene suggests she was brutally beaten before the assault, correct? Yes, you're correct, he replied, casting a hostile glance toward the accused Michael standing in the dock. The killer, after satisfying his lust, mercilessly sent the victim to her death. The post-mortem report clearly states that Jessica's death resulted from the cessation of breathing, I said, wrapping up this line of questioning. In other words, she was strangled. What do you have to say about that? He gave me an odd look and said, I'd say exactly what's written in the post-mortem report. The experts who prepared the post-mortem report conducted a thorough autopsy and various tests to reach their conclusions about the cause of death, I said in a measured tone. What specific role did you play in this process? My sarcastic question visibly rattled him. He puffed up with pride and said, I conducted a thorough investigation. A thorough investigation, I repeated mockingly. Would you care to share the details of this investigation with the Honorable Court? Over the next 5 minutes, Detective Hayes tried to exaggerate his professional performance. To avoid prolonging the matter, I had to interrupt him. Detective Hayes, your departmental speech doesn't satisfy me, nor is it convincing for the Honorable Court, I said firmly. He looked at me questioningly. Then what do you want? It's not about what I want, Detective, I said, emphasizing each word. It's about the prosecution's incomplete and flawed case. What do you mean? He asked, looking at me with surprise. I believe you know very well, I said with a slight smile, that when someone is strangled, the killer exerts significant force. Am I wrong? You're absolutely correct. He nodded in agreement. When the killer strangles the victim, the fingerprints of their fingers leave clear marks on various parts of the victim's neck, commonly referred to as fingerprints or FP, in simpler terms, I said, moving toward my point. Since Jessica was strangled, the killer's fingerprints must be present on her neck, yet the investigation report neither mentions the accused's fingerprints nor includes any fingerprint analysis. What's the explanation for this? Initially, he glanced nervously at the prosecution lawyer, then turned to me and said, Well, we didn't deem it necessary. Very good, I said sarcastically. It seems you didn't find it necessary to conduct such a critical test. I raised my voice slightly. It's as if you were an eyewitness to the murder, so you didn't bother collecting fingerprints from the victim's neck. He didn't respond to my jab and began looking around in confusion. I pressed on with my cross-examination. Detective Hayes, when and who informed you about this incident? The victim's family called the station to report the incident, he explained. It was the morning after the incident. After a couple more questions, I dismissed the investigating officer and turned to the judge. Your Honor, the failure to collect the killer's fingerprints from the victim's neck and compare them with the accused's is a fundamental flaw in the prosecution's case. I request that the court record this negligence. Duly noted, Your Honor, I concluded. The court accepted my request, set the next hearing for 15 days later, and adjourned. At the next hearing, the prosecution presented Jessica's father, William Turner, as their first witness. After taking the oath to tell the truth, he recorded his statement. The prosecution lawyer conducted a brief cross-examination and dismissed him. With the court's permission, I approached to begin my questioning, but first, I deemed it necessary to express sympathy. Mr. Turner, I said gravely, addressing him, I'm deeply saddened by your daughter's tragic death, but cross-examination is necessary. He didn't say anything, just looked at me with pained eyes. When did you learn that your daughter had been killed? I asked. The morning after her disappearance, he replied. Disappearance? I said, startled, looking at him. What? Do you mean? Jessica went to visit her friend Rachel at her house, he explained. This was the night of the incident. She often visited Rachel. They were close friends. Rachel would also come to our house frequently. He paused to catch his breath, then continued. That night when Jessica didn't return, we grew worried. She was our only child. I told my wife Margaret to stay home, and I went to Rachel's house, which is 2 streets away in Tacoma. When I asked Rachel about Jessica, she said Jessica left her house around 10 p.m. What did you do next? I asked. We searched for Jessica all night, he said. We looked everywhere in our neighborhood and contacted relatives across Seattle, both by phone and in person, but we found nothing. Exhausted, we filed a missing person report at the police station. The police arrived at the scene, and soon after, they recovered Jessica's body from the under-construction building. Soon after, I said, emphasizing his words. Did the police perform some kind of magic to know Jessica's body was in that under-construction building? No, sir, no magic, he said, shaking his head. 2 individual statements greatly assisted the police. 2 individuals? I asked, startled again. Who were they? Rachel and Daniel Brooks, William replied. Rachel is Jessica's friend, I said, puzzled. Who's Daniel Brooks? I quickly glanced at the prosecution's witness list and said to myself, this person's name is on the witness list too. Then I asked, what did he do? Yes. William nodded and explained. Daniel Brooks's house is behind the under-construction building, meaning the backs of both properties are adjacent. He works in real estate and lives alone. Curiosity got the better of me, and I asked, Mr. Turner, how exactly did this man assist the police? Well, sir, he said, exhaling deeply, when the police arrived at our house to start their investigation, Rachel's name came up. They questioned her, and within 15 minutes Rachel revealed that Jessica and the accused, Michael, were meeting at the under-construction building that night. This was a major breakthrough. Michael's arrest was a result of Rachel's statement, but that happened later in the afternoon. Before that, the police had already recovered Jessica's body from the building. The court wants to know, I said, seizing the moment. How did the police know to search the under-construction building? I was just getting to that, sir, he said, swallowing hard. Rachel's statement also made it clear that Jessica and Michael used to meet secretly in that building under the cover of darkness. Based on this lead, the police immediately searched the building and had no trouble finding Jessica's body. He paused to steady his breathing, then continued. Later, when the police questioned people in the area, Daniel Brooks testified that he saw the accused frantically leaving the under-construction building that night. All right, I said, nodding after his explanation. Did you ever ask Rachel why she kept Jessica and Michael's relationship a secret from you, especially their meetings in the under-construction building? I did, he said, letting out a heavy sigh. She dodged the question. She deliberately hid their meetings from us. Since she was Jessica's friend, she didn't expose the matter. Mr. Turner, I said, wrapping up my cross-examination, it's no longer a secret that you were aware of Jessica and Michael's relationship long before her death. Michael sent you a letter stating his love for her and his desire to marry her. Am I wrong? You're not wrong, he replied. But there's a lot of misunderstanding about that letter. What kind of misunderstanding? I asked, looking at him questioningly. He explained, the accused claims he wrote the letter before Jessica's engagement and wedding date was set, mentioning their mutual affection, but according to us, the letter arrived after her wedding was finalized, and it contained a threat that if we didn't let Jessica marry him, we should be prepared for dire consequences. Hold on, I interjected. What kind of dire consequences did the accused threaten you with in the letter? He said if we didn't fulfill his wishes, he might be forced to take extreme steps, William answered. For example, kidnapping Jessica or eloping with her. Were those threatening words actually written in the letter? I asked, widening my eyes in surprise. Mr. Turner, did you read the letter yourself? No, sir, he said, shaking his head. I can't read or write. My wife Margaret read it to me. After a few more questions, I concluded my cross-examination. The prosecution's next witness was Jessica's mother, Margaret. After taking the oath and recording her statement, the prosecution lawyer conducted a brief cross-examination and dismissed her. With the court's permission, I approached the witness box. Margaret was a middle-aged, heavy-set woman. Her sharp eye movements suggested she was shrewd and quick-witted. While giving her statement, her tone indicated she was outspoken and blunt. In her statement, Margaret told the court that the accused, Michael, was a reckless and aimless young man who relentlessly pursued her daughter. He constantly tried to manipulate Jessica, who was completely under his influence. When they arranged Jessica's engagement to her cousin Ethan, Michael became furious. After the wedding date was set, he sent a threatening letter, warning that if they proceeded with the marriage to Ethan, they would face dire consequences. I began my cross-examination. Mrs. Turner, I won't argue about whether Michael sent that threatening letter after Jessica's wedding date was set. Let's assume for a moment that he sent the letter exactly as you described in your sworn statement. Can you produce that letter in court? Without waiting for her response, I turned to the judge and added gravely, Your Honor, at the last hearing, the court accepted my request and directed the prosecution to produce the letter at this hearing. The judge glanced at the papers on his desk, then looked at the prosecution lawyer and asked, Counsel, has the mentioned letter been submitted to the court? No, Your Honor, the prosecution lawyer said helplessly, shaking his head. Unfortunately, the letter has been lost. The judge's expression showed displeasure. He turned to me and said, Mr. Bennett, please proceed. I turned back to the prosecution's witness, Jessica's mother. Mrs. Turner, I said in a firm voice, what's the story behind the letter's loss? Well, sir, she said, hesitating, it was such a vile and offensive letter that after reading it to Jessica's father, I tore it to pieces and threw it into the fireplace. Into the fireplace, I said sardonically. Now it's impossible to determine what was written in that letter. I paused briefly, took a deep breath and continued. Mrs. Turner, in your statement you told the court that Michael relentlessly pursued your daughter and often tried to poison her mind against you. You even said Jessica was completely under his control. This suggests that Jessica genuinely liked Michael and wanted to marry him for a peaceful life. Am I wrong? You're not wrong, she admitted, nodding. That's how things were. Then, looking at Michael with a softer expression, she said, My girl was innocent and naive. That devil had her completely trapped. She was like a puppet in his hands and wouldn't listen to our advice. I don't know what poison he filled her mind with, but she danced to his tune. She pointed angrily at Michael and continued emotionally. His intentions were never pure. He led my Jessica astray. We were so fed up with his antics that we arranged her engagement to Ethan and set the wedding date. When that scoundrel realized Jessica was slipping away forever, he lured her to the under-construction building under some pretext, assaulted her, and then killed her. He destroyed our happy home. She broke down, sobbing. That monster deserves the harshest punishment. I say he should be publicly executed. I waited for her to calm down, then asked, Mrs. Turner, when it became clear that Michael was leading Jessica down a dangerous path, why didn't you closely monitor her movements? It's no secret that Rachel's house is right next to Michael's. You should have stopped Jessica from going to Rachel's. Why didn't you? We did stop her, she said emphatically. We stopped her many times and Jessica had mostly complied. But on the night of the incident, I don't know when she slipped out. I had a fever that morning. Doctor said it was the flu. I went to bed early. She paused to catch her breath, then added, and it only became clear after Jessica's death that she was meeting Michael in that under-construction building. If Rachel had told us earlier, things might not have come to this. So Rachel kept you in the dark to maintain her friendship with Jessica, I said gravely, emphasizing her words. As a result, Jessica met her tragic end. Mrs. Turner, in your opinion, shouldn't Rachel face some punishment as well? Absolutely, she should, she said spontaneously. Rachel should indeed face some punishment, I repeated, then turned back to the witness. Mrs. Turner, I asked, looking into her eyes, by burning that letter you destroyed a crucial piece of evidence. Can you tell the court who else read the letter besides you? Jessica and I read it, she replied promptly, and I read it aloud to Jessica's father. The letter is gone, and Jessica is no longer with us, I said, studying her expression. Can you produce anyone else in court who read the letter besides your family? Objection, Your Honor, the prosecution lawyer interjected in a half-protesting tone. The witness has clearly stated that only 3 people in her household knew about the letter. Defense counsel is asking irrelevant questions to harass the witness. He should be instructed to refrain from such tactics. Mr. Bennett, the judge said, addressing me calmly, doesn't the witness's response clarify the situation? Yes, Your Honor. I nodded and turned back to the witness. Mrs. Turner, I said, sharpening my tone, you've claimed with great conviction that Michael cunningly manipulated Jessica and repeatedly poisoned her mind against you. Can you produce any concrete evidence or impartial witness to support these allegations? What are you trying to say? She asked defensively. What I've said is my personal belief, but the accused's version is completely different. Opposite, in fact. He claims Jessica truly loved him and wanted to marry him, but your opposition prevented their union. You engaged her to her cousin, Ethan, and she was absolutely unwilling to go through with it. She wanted to elope with Michael, but he refused. Then your daughter was murdered. That's the story he's fed you, she said sardonically. The truth is what I've just stated. And you have no credible witness to prove that truth, I countered. Perhaps you're unaware that courts require solid evidence to verify claims. I paused briefly, took a deep breath and continued. You burned the letter. You have no evidence for your other complaints against Michael. Moreover, you've failed to produce any concrete proof in court that establishes Michael as your daughter's killer. I turned to the judge and said in a measured tone, Your Honor, all the facts and circumstances are before the court. I have no further questions for the prosecution's witness, Mrs. Turner. With that, the court's allotted time concluded. The judge set the next hearing for 10 days later and adjourned. At the next hearing, the prosecution's key witness and Jessica's confidant Rachel stood in the witness box. Rachel appeared to be in her late 20s, an attractive, slender woman with a fair complexion. After taking the oath, she recorded her statement, telling the court that she had known Jessica since childhood. They attended the same school in Aincham, Tacoma, and were close friends. Jessica shared everything with her. Rachel openly admitted she was fully aware of Jessica and Michael's relationship and their secret meetings in the under-construction building. She said that in the days before her death, Jessica was extremely distressed because her family had set her wedding date with her cousin Ethan. On the day of the incident, Jessica came to Rachel's house before heading to the under-construction building to meet Michael. Rachel claimed she knew nothing further about the murder. After Rachel's statement, the prosecution lawyer approached the witness box to begin cross-examination. "Ms. Rachel," he said, "you testify that Jessica and Michael were deeply in love and secretly met at night in the under-construction building." "Yes, that's absolutely true," she nodded. "I've given my sworn testimony to that effect." "Is it also true that whenever Jessica wanted to meet Michael, she used visiting you as an excuse to leave her house?" The prosecution lawyer asked. "Yes," Rachel nodded again. "Not just to meet Michael. She genuinely visited me often as well." "On the day of the incident, she came to your house to meet Michael, didn't she?" the lawyer said, looking into her eyes calmly. "And you never saw your friend alive after that?" "That's the truth," Rachel replied confidently. The prosecution lawyer asked a few more questions before concluding his cross-examination. The judge looked at me and asked, "Mr. Bennett, do you wish to question the prosecution's witness?" I nodded, stood, and approached the witness box. Clearing my throat, I began. "Ms. Rachel, you told the court earlier that Jessica was your childhood friend. You studied together and were confidants. You were well aware of Jessica and Michael's love story and even facilitated their secret meetings, am I wrong?" "No, sir, you're absolutely correct," she replied briefly. "Is it true that Jessica loved Michael deeply and wanted to marry him?" I asked. "Yes, that's true," she nodded. "And is it also true that Michael informed Jessica's parents of his intentions through a letter?" I asked, picking up the pace. "I don't know anything about a letter," she said hesitantly, "but I can say with certainty that Jessica's parents knew about their relationship and were strongly opposed to their marriage." Noticing her hesitation about the letter, I clarified, "I'm referring to the letter Michael claims he sent to express his desire to marry Jessica, while her mother claims it was a threatening letter warning of dire consequences." "I know nothing about any letter," she said, avoiding eye contact. It was clear she didn't want to discuss the letter. It seemed unlikely that Jessica would have kept such a letter from her confidant, suggesting Rachel was aligning with Jessica's mother. This reinforced that Michael's version of the letter was likely true. "Since Jessica's mother burned the letter, let's move on," I said casually, then looked into Rachel's eyes and asked, "You confirm that Jessica and Michael were deeply in love and their primary desire was to marry as soon as possible?" "Yes, that's how it was," she replied. "But Jessica's parents disapproved of Michael," I continued. "So they not only engaged her to her cousin Ethan, but also set the wedding date for a month later." Rachel nodded. "Yes, Jessica was deeply distressed when her wedding to Ethan was finalized," I said. "What was Michael's reaction to this?" "As far as I know, he was very hurt," she replied. "What's the source of your information?" I asked. "Jessica told me everything," she answered. "Was Michael merely hurt, or did he express any strong reaction?" I asked. Contrary to my expectations, she supported Michael, saying he didn't react negatively. In fact, he tried to convince Jessica to accept her parents' wishes. "And how did Jessica respond to his advice?" I asked. "She strongly disliked Ethan," Rachel said gravely. Michael's passive stance forced her hand. Otherwise, she was ready to take drastic steps. "Ms. Rachel," I said softly, "the court wants to know what drastic steps Jessica was considering. She was your confidant. It's unlikely you were unaware of her intentions." "She was planning to elope with Michael," Rachel said in a measured tone. "On the day of the incident, she told me she would discuss her plan with Michael that night and try to convince him to run away and get married in court. She believed everything would work out afterward." "Did Michael react to her rebellious plan?" I asked. "I don't know," she said, shaking her head. After Jessica left my house that night, I never saw her again. The next morning, I learned she'd been murdered. You didn't see her again, but I'll tell you that Jessica presented her plan to Michael that night, I said. He refused to entertain such foolishness, tried to reason with her, and left her in the under-construction building to join his friends. When he left, she was alive and well. Rachel shrugged indifferently. That could be true. Miss Rachel, you knew every detail of Jessica and Michael's relationship, I said, adopting a sharper tone. When it was clear they couldn't be together and Jessica's wedding date was set, why didn't you inform her parents about her dangerous plan to elope? Your silence might have contributed to her death. Death comes at its appointed time, counsel, she said calmly. My silence or openness couldn't change that. As for your question, Jessica made me swear not to tell anyone. Was Jessica's oath more important than her life, I asked. Absolutely not, she said firmly. If I'd known she'd be killed that night, I would have never let her go to that building. If she insisted, I would have immediately informed her parents. All right, I appreciate your sentiments for your late friend, I said moderately. Then asked, how long had Jessica and Michael's relationship been going on? About a year, she replied after a moment's thought. A year is a significant time, I said, widening my eyes. Jessica, your close confidant, must have shared details of their romantic conversations with you. Yes, she shared. Everything, Rachel nodded. That's why I can say with certainty that they loved each other deeply. She must have mentioned Michael's habits, temperament and general behavior, I said, carefully steering toward my goal. Did Michael ever try to overstep boundaries in private? Did Jessica ever tell you about any aggressive or inappropriate behavior from him? No, she said, shaking her head emphatically. Jessica never mentioned anything like that. I have no further questions, Your Honor, I said, turning to the judge. The prosecution's witness has made it clear that Michael was neither lustful nor malicious. Their relationship lasted nearly a year, during which they met privately, many times, but Michael never took advantage of those moments. There's no record of any misconduct or aggression from him. Assault or criminal behavior is far beyond question. He never tried to exploit Jessica in private. Rachel's testimony confirms Michael's honorable and principled character. Such a peace-loving person could neither tarnish his love nor strangle her to death. I paused, glanced at the courtroom and continued. Your Honor, the numerous inconsistencies in this case prove that my client, Michael Davis, is completely innocent, a loving, peaceable and honorable man. He's been framed in this murder case through a deep conspiracy. I paused again, casting a mocking glance at the prosecution lawyer and Detective Robert Hayes, then continued. For example, the prosecution's charge sheet lacks a fingerprint report, despite it being obvious that strangulation leaves clear. Fingerprints on the victim's neck. These could have been matched with the accused's, but no such effort was made. When I asked the investigating officer about this, he said, "We didn't deem it necessary." In my view, and in the eyes of the law, this is an utterly unreasonable response. I paused to catch my breath, then added, "The victim's parents, especially her mother, Margaret, claim Michael sent a threatening letter warning of dire consequences if they didn't let Jessica marry him. The prosecution has used this alleged letter to paint Michael as the killer, claiming he acted on his threat by assaulting and strangling Jessica to make an example of her parents. But, amusingly, the prosecution has failed to produce this letter. As evidence, it was supposedly burned days before Jessica's death. And one final point. I paused dramatically, took a deep breath and continued. The final point concerns Michael's character and nature. Rachel's testimony proves that despite numerous private meetings, Michael never tried to take advantage of Jessica, which attests to his strong character. Therefore, I earnestly request the court to recognize my client's innocence and issue orders for his release in light of these facts. Objection, Your Honor, the prosecution lawyer shouted, asserting his presence. The judge looked at him questioningly. He clarified, Your Honor, my learned friend has prematurely begun his arguments. The prosecution's witness testimonies are not yet complete. The judge reviewed the prosecution's witness list and muttered to himself, Daniel Brooks's testimony is still pending. He looked at the prosecution lawyer and asked, Counsel, when will you present your witness, Daniel Brooks? At the next hearing, Your Honor, the prosecution lawyer replied. Very well. The judge nodded, then turned to me. Mr. Bennett, how many witnesses do you intend to present for the defense? I believe one witness will suffice, I said confidently. All right, the judge said calmly. The prosecution and defense shall present their respective witnesses at the next hearing so this case can be decided promptly. With that, the court's time concluded. The judge set the next hearing for 15 days later and adjourned. At the next hearing, I requested to present the defense witness, Michael's friend Connor, first, which the court immediately approved. I argued that Connor needed to return to his job on time, so his testimony should be recorded first. Connor was the young man who watched a late-night movie with Michael on the night of the incident. According to the post-mortem report, Jessica's death occurred between 10 p.m. and midnight, the same time Michael was with Connor at a local cinema in Seattle, making it impossible for him to be involved in the murder. After taking the oath and recording his statement, I approached the witness box for cross-examination. Looking into Connor's eyes, I asked in a friendly tone, Mr. Connor, you surely remember the night Jessica was killed? Yes, I remember everything, he replied affirmatively. What time did you meet Michael that night? I asked. Around 9:15 p.m., he said. Did you go to him or did he come to you? I asked. He came to us, he clarified. Us? I asked, surprised. What do you mean? I mean, he explained, I was standing at the corner of our street in Tacoma with my friends Ryan and Tyler. Michael joined us, and we started chatting casually. He seemed quite sad and troubled. I was feeling bored that day, so to lift his spirits and my own, I suggested we go see a movie. He agreed immediately. We left Ryan and Tyler there and went to the cinema. What movie did you see that night? I asked. It was an action movie, Connor said. A Bruce Willis flick called Die Hard. I nodded and asked, what time did you arrive at the cinema that night? I think it was around 9:45 p.m., he replied thoughtfully. By the time we bought tickets and entered, the screen was on, showing trailers for upcoming films. What time did you leave the cinema? I asked. 10 minutes to midnight, he said. And what time did you get home? I asked. Around 12:30 a.m., he replied. Think carefully, Mr. Connor, I said, emphasizing each word. From 9:15 p.m. to 12:30 a.m. that night, was Michael with you the entire time? Did he ever leave your sight even briefly? I'm ready to swear on anything, he said confidently. He was with me the whole time. One final question, I said, looking into his eyes. You spent nearly 3 hours with Michael that night. You must have noticed what he was wearing. Yes, I remember clearly. He nodded with certainty. Please describe his clothing to the court, I said, calmly. Michael was wearing black pants and a checkered shirt, Connor said confidently. The checks on the shirt were green and purple. Are you sure? I asked, looking into his eyes. Yes, I'm certain, he said firmly. I turned to the judge and said, Your Honor, the defense witness testifies that between 10 p.m. and midnight, Michael was with him at a cinema far from the crime scene, making it impossible for him to be involved in Jessica's murder. I paused, took a deep breath and added, This is the defense's final stand. Connor was excused. Shortly after, the prosecution's witness, Daniel Brooks, took the stand. Daniel Brooks was around 35, a stocky man with thinning, graying hair. As previously mentioned, he was a real estate agent with an office in downtown Seattle and lived alone in a house behind the under-construction building, their backyards adjacent. After recording his sworn statement, the prosecution lawyer began cross-examination. I should mention that my friend and Michael's well-wisher, journalist James Carter, provided invaluable assistance in this case, particularly with information about key figures, including Daniel Brooks. Mr. Brooks, the prosecution lawyer, began, Is it true that you knew the accused prior to this incident? Yes, I often saw him around the neighborhood, Brooks nodded, but we never had any personal interactions. No one's talking about personal interactions, the lawyer said casually. I just want to know if you had any difficulty recognizing him when you saw him leaving the crime scene that night. I recognized him immediately, Brooks said confidently. There's no question of a mistake. Mr. Brooks, the court wants to know what time it was when you saw the accused leaving the under-construction building, the lawyer asked, continuing the cross-examination. I believe it was around 10:30 or 11 p.m., Brooks replied. What was the accused's demeanor as he left the building? The lawyer asked. He looked very agitated, Brooks said, pointing at Michael. His face showed distress, his hair was disheveled, and he was in such a frenzy as if he was in a hurry to get somewhere. Throughout this, my client Michael stood silently in the dock. The plight of an accused during a trial is heart-wrenching. They have so much to say but must remain silent, enduring every accusation. It's a test of patience. The court doesn't permit them to speak unless instructed. In everyday life, people can't stay quiet for a moment when falsely accused, but an accused in the dock has no choice. I was pleased to see Michael standing firm, as per my instructions, against the tide of accusations. The prosecution lawyer asked a few more questions and concluded. With the judge's permission, I approached Daniel Brooks. I began lightly, ensuring he didn't sense that I planned to dismantle his testimony. Mr. Brooks, I said in a friendly tone, may I address you as Mr. Brooks if you don't mind? Why would I mind, counsel? He said simply. Most people call me that. Mr. Brooks, how are things in Olympia? I asked, referring to a city in Washington. He flinched. What do you mean, sir? He asked, startled. It's quite clear, I said, looking into his eyes. My information suggests you live alone in Seattle, while your family is in Olympia. Yes, he said, regaining composure. They're doing fine. When was the last time you visited your family in Olympia? I asked. About 2 months ago, he replied, looking puzzled. If you don't mind, could you share the names of your wife and children? I asked. My wife's name is Laura, and my children are Emily and Jacob, he said hesitantly. Are they still your family? I asked, emphasizing each word. What do you mean? He said, visibly shaken. You know what I mean, I said firmly, drawing on information from James Carter. Children always belong to their father, whether raised by their mother or father. But I understand Laura hasn't been your wife for the past year. What are you saying? He stammered. I'm stating the truth, I said sternly. Laura divorced you a year ago due to your misconduct. Objection, Your Honor, the prosecution lawyer protested. The court is hearing Jessica's murder case, and my learned friend is wasting time with irrelevant questions about the witness's personal life, attempting to defame him publicly. No such thing, Your Honor, I said calmly. I'm verifying a harsh truth. If the witness refuses to answer, I won't press, as the residents of Olympia's Market District know why Laura divorced Daniel Brooks. The judge said calmly, Mr. Bennett, set aside the witness's past and focus on the under-construction building case. Following the judge's directive, I asked, Mr. Brooks, your house is behind the under-construction building. Where were you when you saw the accused leaving the building? I was walking on my roof, he replied. Walking on the roof? All good? I asked. It was a hot, humid night, he explained. I couldn't sleep, so I went to the roof for some fresh air. You told the prosecution lawyer that you saw the accused leaving the building around 10:30 or 11 p.m., I said. Yes, that's what I said, he confirmed, swallowing hard. But at that time, Michael was with his friend Connor at a cinema. Enjoying a movie, I said sharply. That cinema is quite far from the crime scene. I paused, took a deep breath, and added, Mr. Brooks, did you see anyone else leaving the under-construction building that night? No way, he said adamantly. I couldn't mistake him. So, you're saying Connor lied? I asked. Obviously. He said, But Mr. Brooks, I said, subtly tightening the noose, besides Connor, 2 other individuals, Ryan and Tyler, exist in this world and can testify in court if needed. They chatted with Michael between 9:15 and 9:45 p.m. that night, and saw him leave with Connor for the cinema. They're all in it together, he said, making a face. Connor, Ryan, and Tyler are Michael's close friends, so they'd lie to save him. But in your view, Michael isn't innocent, I said, baiting him. You believe he assaulted and killed Jessica? Yes, that's the truth, he said impulsively. Did you see Michael assaulting or killing Jessica? I asked harshly. No, he faltered. When did I say that? Just seconds ago, I said aggressively. You claimed it's the truth that Michael assaulted and killed Jessica. Your statement implies you're either an eyewitness to this double crime or have solid evidence. No such thing, counsel, he said, stumbling. I only saw him leaving the building that night. You said he was agitated, his face distressed, hair disheveled, in a frenzy, as if in a hurry, I said, slowly tightening the trap. I wrong? No, sir, you're correct, he said, nodding. That was his condition. What did you think when you saw him, I asked. That he'd done something wrong in the building, he replied. That's why he was fleeing in a hurry. Did you go into the building to check the situation after he left? I asked, staring into his eyes. No, he said, sounding confused. Why not, I pressed. That goes against human nature. His behavior should have sparked immense curiosity. You should have either checked the building yourself or alerted someone. You said you couldn't sleep that night, so why didn't you act? Well, sir, he said, making a face, I don't like meddling in other people's business. The police asked me, so I spoke. Very well, I nodded dramatically and said, one final question, Mr. Brooks. On the night of the incident when you were on your roof due to the heat and insomnia and saw the accused frantically leaving the under-construction building behind your house, what was he wearing? I think, he stammered, he was wearing a white shirt and pants. You think or you're certain, I said aggressively. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom, and some spectators gasped as Connor had just described Michael's clothing. The courtroom's reaction unnerved Brooks, who looked desperately at the prosecution lawyer. Not there, look here, I said commandingly. He turned to me, rattled. Are you certain you saw Michael in a white shirt and pants, frantically leaving the building? I asked, pressing harder. Yes, he said weakly, wiping sweat from his brow. But Michael claims he was wearing a blue shirt and pants that night, I said. And Connor corroborated his statement. They're both lying, he said in a strangled voice. Scientific and medical research shows that when someone lies, their saliva dries up and their throat feels parched, just like you're experiencing now, I said, staring into his eyes aggressively. Earlier, Connor clearly told the court that Michael was wearing black pants and a green and purple checkered shirt. But you just said he was wearing a yellow shirt, he faltered, stopping mid-sentence and staring at me like a deer in headlights. I've said what I needed to, I said triumphantly. Now tell the court what Michael was wearing when you saw him leaving the building, because your eyes couldn't have been mistaken. You clearly saw his distressed expression and disheveled hair from your roof. He rubbed his neck nervously and muttered, water. Water after you answer, I said firmly. Let me think, he said, looking around frantically. This is all, Your Honor, I said, turning to the judge decisively. The prosecution's witness, Daniel Brooks, has been exposed as a liar clear as day. I request that the court remand Mr. Brooks to police custody for further investigation. I'm confident this will reveal the true killer's identity. As I stepped away, muttering to myself, Brooks panicked at the mention of police custody. From the witness box, he shouted, I didn't kill Jessica. Let me go. I'll turn myself in. I have nothing to do with this. I'm leaving. Seeing the situation escalate, the judge ordered, detain the prosecution's witness, Daniel Brooks. Police sprang into action and court officials blocked the courtroom door. Moments later, the police arrested Brooks. When someone is caught with solid evidence, the police don't need much effort to extract a confession. Brooks confessed to Jessica's murder. According to the events, Brooks had learned that Jessica and Michael were secretly meeting in the under-construction building. He created a small peephole in his backyard wall to eavesdrop on their conversations. On the night of the incident, their discussion shocked him. He realized Jessica was insisting on eloping with Michael, who was trying to dissuade her. A brief argument ensued, and Michael left her in the building. Jessica, taunting his cowardice, sat there crying. At that moment, Brooks was overtaken by sinister impulses. Before Jessica could leave the building, Brooks confronted her. He hadn't seen Michael or his clothing that night, and his claims about Michael's appearance and demeanor were fabricated to frame him. When Brooks approached Jessica, his desires and senses were entirely under malevolent control. As she wiped her tears to leave, he grabbed her. Jessica screamed and struggled, but Brooks's dark impulses prevailed. He clamped one hand tightly over her mouth and nose to silence her, using the other to subdue her. In the struggle, her clothing tore, and she sustained injuries. Her breathing stopped and she collapsed lifeless. Brooks then fulfilled his sinister desires without resistance. When his senses returned, fear of being caught overwhelmed him. If Jessica had survived to tell others, he'd have been finished. In a panic, he strangled her to death. At the next hearing, the court honorably acquitted my client. Brooks' confession made the judge's decision straightforward. Jessica was a headstrong and willful girl. If she had listened to Michael, she might not have met such a tragic end. But as they say, what's written in fate, sorrow and trouble, will come to pass.